Welcome to this talk about security startup ideas. So I'll do some pseudo disclaimers. I'm not a VC, and this is not financial advice. These are my hot takes, only hot takes on what kinds of security companies I wish existed today. You get what you came for. Now that you know what I'm not, who am I? I just had an intro. My name is Kaczorowski. I'm not currently affiliated with any organization, but I was previously the head of product at Tailscale, worked on software supply chain security at GitHub, and worked on container security and encryption at rest at Google. So if I'm unemployed, why would you listen to me about starting a startup? Well, I've been thinking about, I think I've been good at identifying what I think are the hot trends in security and then pursuing those in my career. I really enjoy working on that hot new thing and the breaking edge security problem. So I worked on container security in 2017, software supply chain security in 2020, and I joined Tailscale in 2021. And I've been lucky. And as I've been lucky in identifying these trends, I've been willing to take larger and larger risks with my career, from switching teams to switching companies to joining an early stage startup. I've also started to make angel investments in the security space in areas that I see that are lacking and where I see companies are really well positioned to make an impact. Companies like ChainGuard, Truffle, Run Reveal, Insignia, lots of different companies in this space. So my personal investment hypothesis now hinges on the fact that the most valuable thing that I have to invest is my own time. So I want to make investments with my career and with my time that I think are going to pay off for me, right? Both financially, but also in terms of learning and enjoyment and all the things that you want reward out of life, right? So I'm thinking about starting something new in the security space. I've been looking at the market, and this talk is a summary of some of those ideas and conversations that I've been having. So in today's talk, we'll cover, how do you find a good idea of what to work on, how you limit the space of things that you're considering, sources of potential ideas, and then I'm going to pitch you 5 startups that don't exist today that I've talked to VCs about, and you'll hear their feedback. This is hopefully the fun part, and then we'll wrap it up. This talk isn't general advice on starting a startup. You can find lots of great advice elsewhere, so just don't ask me. All right, so how do you find a good idea to work on? What even makes an idea good? I'm going to oversimplify this, but it's solve an actual problem for an actual user that they're willing to pay money for. I'm not saying anything groundbreaking or novel, but it still surprises me how often startups are unable to articulate what they do in this way. So let's speed run some of the obvious things so we can get to that good stuff. So first, solve an actual problem. Start with the problem that you're solving, not the solution and not a tool or technology. What is the underlying issue that the user has that you're trying to make better? So for example, I see this a lot in security. Our team has too many dashboards. They can't see all of the information, so we're going to consolidate them all into a new dashboard. Is that really the problem? An alternative way to look at the same issue would be to ask if the team has too many tools, if the tools are too noisy, if they don't know how to appropriately prioritize the information that's being surfaced in those tools. The answer is rarely building, yet another dashboard. And just like you need to have a clear understanding of the problem that you're solving, you need a clear understanding of your user. So for example, is your customer a CISO of a Fortune 500 company with a security team of 100 people? Or are they a VP-Eng at a startup who's also happens to be responsible for security and they have limited headcount? You need to be way more precise than you realize. This particularly matters in security because security products are not always bought by security teams. You might be dealing with a CTO, a CIO, a CISO, a VP-Eng, or even a specific security team like SecOps when selling your product. The DevOps space in particular conflates this, where we start to see what are nominally security products being sold to developers. Another call out here, in general, it's easier to work on what you know. So if you're a security engineer, it might be hard for you to relate to and build a product for a customer success agent because you just don't have the fundamental understanding of their space. It's much, much easier to build for someone like you and a problem that you're familiar with and that you faced yourself. And lastly, it has to be a problem that somebody would be willing to pay money to solve. At least that's true in enterprise, right? In consumer, you might be able to cover operating costs with things like ads. It's really hard to quantify this last part. Budgets are limited, but there are a few ways that you can, try to figure this out and suss this out. Like how much are they already paying to solve this problem, but in a different way? It's much easier to go after an existing line item on a budget than to create a new one. How much value are you delivering? Can you reduce spend in other areas or somehow make the team more efficient? And how critical is this issue actually to the business, right? Everything in security is critical, but there's a difference between being the number 1 thing the CISO thinks about and the number 10 thing the CISO thinks about. And you're going to get a lot less money if you're not number 10. You can also ask people if they'd be willing to pay for something, but they're almost always going to tell you yes, but then not do it in reality. So at some point, you just need to take that leap and see if the revenue comes in. So some ways of thinking of good ideas and sources to start with good ideas is obviously like to talk to your users. Take time to understand their problems. Again, if you're in the user base of what you're building for, this should hopefully be easier. Like, what is something that doesn't quite work for your workflow the way that you want it to? What's something that you personally waste too much time on at work? Or like, what's the cool internal tool that you've built that's been really useful? This is typically where folks get ideas from, their own experiences and frustrations. So let's take that to our users. Let's say we're building something for CISOs. I've been talking to a handful of CISOs and security leaders in the last couple of weeks. Here are some of the things they've legitimately complained about, like not quite verbatim, but like specific things they've told me they're worried about right now. The use of LLMs in their organization. They know that they're becoming more widely used, and they can't or don't want to stop the business from using them. So they're looking for some kind of guardrail. I even heard someone literally phrase this request as an LLM firewall. Use of LLMs externally to the organization. So for example, suppose you decide to create a support tool or a config generation tool. How do you prevent sensitive or private data from leaking out of that model, such as through like a prompt injection attack? For some companies building infrastructure, concerns about workload isolation and detecting abuse. 5 years ago, we'd be having this exact conversation about crypto mining. Now the concern is about training models. If I have a free sign-up flow, how do I know someone's not immediately training a model on it? Concerns around using LLMs to write code or do other critical tasks, and then being able to validate that the output of that is actually what was intended or sufficiently explainable. At the very minimum, being able to tag that as saying this was content generated by an LLM that I can then review or remove or whatever at a later point in time. And lastly, somebody did mention kind of the same old security thing we've always been dealing with, patching dependencies, but they mentioned in the context of Jupyter notebooks, which I thought was very interesting. So like we have all the same problems that we had before. We're just starting to talk a lot more about AI and ML, as I'm sure you've heard, all this weekend at this conference. I hate to say it, but something like 80% of the top concerns that I'm hearing from CISOs right now are about AI ML. And that's huge. It's hard to tell if this is gonna be a phase and it's gonna pass, but it's definitely that top of mind concern. Another source of potential ideas is replacing an existing stagnant market leader, a company or technology that's been around for so long that it's ubiquitous, but everyone hates using it, or the company's gotten so large that it's slow to innovate. It's falling behind what users actually want. What you're looking for here is a solution that's now considered mainstream, but there are no new upstart competitors. Tech moves so quickly. So if I look by market cap at the biggest security companies today, they are Palo Alto Networks, CrowdStrike, Fortinet, Cloudflare, and Zscaler. And a lot of these are actually not super easy to compete with. Like I understand why they're the largest by market cap. So Palo Alto Networks, for example, is really consistent, to their credit, about acquiring their competitors. So there aren't tiny companies competing with them, right? And building those competitors into their product to innovate. Or Fortinet actually still sells a lot of hardware. So unless you're gonna start getting into that business, like it's hard to compete with Fortinet. Similarly, Cloudflare has a huge set of POPs that you'd have to similarly build out to compete in that space. Some companies that might be much easier to compete with or more ripe for competition might be HashiCorp, RIP, Splunk, or Okta. From their S1, HashiCorp makes 85% of the revenue from Terraform and Vault. And let's be honest, most of that is Vault. So conservatively, let's say 50 or 60% of HashiCorp's $600 million annual revenue is Vault. So you're looking at like 350 million annual revenue that's a huge market. Like it's a nice market to go after. Splunk is famously expensive and increasingly hard to use for a company that has $4 billion in annual revenue. So similarly, if you can build a better SIM, it's an attractive market. And we do see lots of companies in that space now, right? You see companies like Panther, Cribble, and RunReveal, as well as larger tech companies going after this revenue like Datadog. And Okta. Okta doesn't really have a viable competitor today. Most of the other IDPs were bought by the PE firm Thoma Bravo in the last couple of years. So if you're not buying Google or Microsoft and you need something more complex, you might be looking at like OneLogin, which is also a stalwart. There isn't a fresher option to what's effectively like a $2.5 billion annual revenue player. Some startups are chipping in other parts of it. So like Clerk is competing with Auth0, but like the core product that Okta has, I don't see a viable new competitor to today. Another thing to look for is what new technology enables, right? Is there a recent innovation or technology that makes a problem that was previously hard to solve now feasible? It might already have been possible but expensive, but now it's a reasonable price or a reasonable scale. Again, just make sure that if you're starting from this point, you are working on something that solves a problem for an actual user, right? If you have a cool technology hammer, everything looks like a nail. So some things that have come about in recent years, Nix, which is a package manager, an OS, a programming language, whatever you want it to be. Medino, a JavaScript runtime that is slightly more secure, and Wasm that lets you execute client and server apps on the web in a memory-safe execution environment. WireGuard, which is a VPN tunnel with modern crypto. Passkeys are effectively replacements for passwords. eBPF is a way for you to run privileged programs in the kernel. LLMs, again, we've heard a lot about that this weekend. And then LLMs are also something that you have to secure, right? So we have both sides of that coin. And looking also a little bit before LLMs, I think there's been a trend in general of defragging the cloud providers, of people moving towards smaller, easier to deploy, bespoke clouds. So things like Vercel or Netlify in the Next.js space, or Supabase competing with Firebase. Other things here to look at are not a technology, but a sales motion. Product-led growth, or PLG. Hasn't really taken off in security, but it's a big deal in DevOps and infra. So the idea is, instead of selling software top-down, you're selling it bottom-up. And lastly, everything that's happening right now in Ukraine, Gaza, and possibly in Taiwan, we're going to have probably an increase in defense spending in the next couple of years. And if you have other ideas for this list, I'd love to hear it. All right, let's get to pitch time. I'm going to do elevator pitches for 5 different fake companies. There are some things that would normally be in a pitch that I won't cover, like the team, the background of the team, all that kind of stuff. And there are things that aren't normally in a pitch that I will cover, like what might be hard about that idea. I presented these 5 pitches, these literal slides, to 4 VC firms this week with the context of this talk. I talked to VCs who are specifically interested in security investments and typically do seed or A rounds, and I've included quotes from them so you can hear the same feedback as me, but I haven't identified any of the VCs to protect the pseudo-innocent. The last thing I will point out is that you can build a successful company that doesn't take VC funding, that doesn't have a VC revenue model, all that things, creating jobs for people, building something you're passionate about is success, right? So don't assume that you need VC money to build a successful startup. All right, I need 4 volunteers who are good at reading and speak loud.
Speak loud?
That's Alice. I got Alice. Who's Bob? You're Bob. I need Charlie. Who wants to be Charlie? Charlie. I got Charlie. Last one. David. Perfect. Okay, let's go. I'm going to start pitching. Did I miss a slide? I did miss a slide. I'm sorry. I was too excited. Okay. I want to introduce you to Trust Verify. By the way, all the startup names are ChatGPT generated, and the logos are from Logo.com's AI tool. Okay, at Trust Verify, we're working on scalable vendor security reviews. The average Fortune 500 company has thousands of vendors with access to some of their data. And even if they can properly evaluate some of those vendors, each of the infrastructure providers has dozens of data sub-processors. It's hard to understand where your user's data really is and what kind of risks you might face. Typically, when you onboard a new vendor, you complete a vendor security assessment. And in fact, this vendor risk management is expected as part of SOC 2. It typically requires the vendor to fill in a spreadsheet with hundreds of very similar, confusing questions, taking many hours. It's then a highly manual process for the buyer to review these evaluations and identify potential risks. And it's the last very time-consuming step, blocking a purchase from moving forward. On top of that, it doesn't work. According to the Verizon 2022 Data Breach Investigations Report, 62% of all data breaches happen via third-party vendors. So that's where Trust Verify comes in. We're building an AI assistant to let you review and tailor vendor security reviews to your organization's needs without needing to change how you work with vendors. Trust Verify uses a model trained on security questionnaires and security policies, as well as public data sets like breach disclosures, sub-processors, and privacy policies. It also uses retrieval augmented generation for reading in additional private vendor-specific information like risk assessment questionnaires, security policies, and more. Vendors don't even need to fill in your questionnaire. They can just share what they already have, and Trust Verify will identify any missing or inconsistent information that you might need in your review. Less manual work for vendors means a faster turnaround time for you. Thank you so much. That was good. Great. So Trust Verify is an LLM for security vendor reviews. The space that you're competing with is currently owned by a company called Security Scorecard, who does a mix of online questionnaires and some really shitty basic web scraping for things like expired SSL certs, missing content security policies. I'm sorry if any of you have ever had to log into securityscorecard.com. I have. I hate it. And those are probably not really relevant unless you're a web app security company. So LLMs, and specifically the use of RAG, are what's making a different product here possible. I see a lot of opposite products in this space. I see a lot of companies, like I expect someone like Vanta, Adrada, SecureFrame to work on filling in the questionnaires. But then we're still gonna ask a human to read all this like machine generated bullshit. So like I'd love to get to a world where the machines are writing the bullshit for the machines, right? Like I think that's kind of where we're heading, right? So why might you not want to pursue this idea? Well, if you think that a key part of the solution is RAG, Security Scorecard does have kind of the best position in the market for this. But I also don't think they're going to do this. They're kind of a stalwart. No, the main reason I'm less excited about this idea is that it's a small market, again, for VC, not for most companies, right? Security Scorecard has an estimated revenue of $100 million, which is on the smaller side of what we'd like to go after. And unless you're like at a Fortune 500 company, this is probably like a fractional part of someone's job. So saving them time is great, but you're likely to, the most you can charge is probably one person's salary, right? And that's not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things. Okay, Alice. What did you think?
This is very manual. It's a great consulting business. I agree that the market is too small.
Brandon.
Can you read? No. This is like the movie of vendors. SOC 2 isn't enough. SOC 2 clearly isn't preventing data breaches. I have an axe to grind with. Drata, Vanta. Why would I buy this? Does spending on this have measurable effects on improving security? No.
Is the goal to reduce cost, move faster, or to be more secure? The urgency is on the person making the sale. So the vendor side, not the buyer reviewing vendors.
You could say that you're a security scorecard, but that you don't suck. This is a good ATM business. It prints money. The only people who will win in this market long term are the insurance companies. It's going to end with some single score to evaluate vendors, and the gap will be filled by buying insurance.
They also have hot takes. So to summarize, they think it's a consulting business, which can be a great business to be in, but usually not one that's venture funded. And they're not sure if the user proposition is about improving security or reducing spend. All right, next one. Hi, I'm here from SecureBridge, and I wanted to talk to you about how to get your business compliant with federal security requirements. Cloud has eaten the world. When just a decade ago, you might have still considered provisioning your own servers. Today, almost all infrastructure is somebody else's, being built on top of AWS, Azure, or GCP. According to Forbes, 94% of all companies globally currently use cloud infrastructure or SaaS products, from SMBs to multinational corporations to banks. However, one group has not caught up. That's the government, the US government. In the US, government agencies or vendors who sell to government agencies make up a tiny fraction of the cloud market spend, with federal cloud spend estimated to be about $20 billion of a total market now exceeding $600 billion. And that doesn't seem like much, but government spend is behind other verticals and it's growing much faster now. So federal, state, local governments and agencies that have historically been slower to adopt emerging technology are now catching up. However, something else is actually stopping them: the lack of attractive cloud-based solutions. The government version of a service, like cheese, is always worse than what everybody else can get. Onerous FedRAMP requirements, such as employing US persons and using FIPS-certified cipher suites, are only met by a handful of solutions. So since FedRAMP was introduced in 2013, 100 products were certified to be FedRAMP compliant as of 2018, another 100 by 2020, another 100 by 2023. As of right now, there are only 335 authorized FedRAMP services that a government or agency can choose from, and that includes 9 different versions of Oracle Cloud. Vendors are struggling to make their solutions available to the government. So we are SecureBridge, giving SaaS vendors a way to more quickly gain FedRAMP compliance in order to be able to sell their solutions to the government. SecureBridge is a comprehensive solution, including not only helping implement necessary security controls, gathering evidence, and filling out questionnaires, but also helping with starter documentation needed as part of the application process. And we're fast. With our experience, we can accelerate FedRAMP to take less than a year to get to FedRAMP Low. How do we do it? It's a 3-pronged solution. First, we automate pre-assessments by reviewing your existing security controls and working with a third-party assessment organization to generate your reports. By pulling from your existing controls, we can significantly reduce the time spent on preparation. Then we provision you with a tenanted environment in your cloud provider of choice, managed by US persons. This allows you to quickly meet the technical compliance requirements with the cloud providers, even if you're not a US-based company. And lastly, we help you track the gaps in your security assessment report to burn down, connecting to your existing code base and infrastructure for automated reporting. Thank you. All right, so FedRAMP as a service. There's been a lot of additional interest in SOC 2 from the last couple of years, thanks to players like, we talked about them, Vanta, Drata, SecureFrame, but also interest in delivering on-prem solutions more easily with products like Replicated. They haven't really gotten into that FedRAMP space, and that's partly because of the burden of doing FedRAMP. It's just so high. A lot of it is process, and there's not that much to automate. I don't think actually getting access to like a FedRAMP AWS account is the hard part. This is probably like a great consultancy business with some product support, like some automated self-assessments, but it's not a standalone product. And I suspect that's what folks like Vanta are discovering, that actually list FedRAMP on their website, but seemingly don't have any, at least not anything publicly available that addresses this. Another difficulty here is going to be time to value. So if you're taking a sales cycle of several months and then doing several months of work with that customer, then the customer has like potentially, between 6 years to see value, they have like 5 years to see value. It's not a huge difference. All right, VCs.
This only solves half the problem. Compliance is not one part, the other is go-to-market. You and your customers need to build a federal go-to-market team. Your success relies on the end user, on selling the product to the government. You're a channel.
I like this one. Right now, companies get FedRAMP closer to 100 million ARR. Do you get them to 500 million ARR?
50.
10 million ARR? This is a TAM expander. However, the federal budget dictates your total market size. This would have to be straight top-down enterprise sale.
Is Vanta not doing this? How much of this is services oriented versus how much is really tech? If your value prop is going twice as fast, at what cost? And after an initial upfront cost, your customers don't want to talk to you. It's a bad NDR.
Another nice ATM business. It's not venture scale. You could build a marketplace with this and effectively become the channel VAR partner for government. But that's not building software.
So the VCs called out, it's a services-oriented business. You're more of a channel than a product. Again, attractive, but not necessarily in VC land. And you need a sales motion to make this work. And this is actually really critical. Like both you and your customers need to actually understand how to sell to feds. All right, meet Fort Alice. We're a secret management solution that developers actually use. Also, apparently Fortalice is like a word for like a small fort, but Alice and Bob, so Fort Alice. Just bear with me. You have thousands of infrastructure secrets, API keys, basic auth creds, TLS certs that you'd like to keep private. Your team rolled out a secret management solution, but Trufflehog still tells you that you're leaking secrets everywhere. And each one is an incident, a rotated secret, and then it happens again next week. The secret management solutions available today just aren't built for developers. They're built for the security team. There's encryption, they have access control, auditing, all the things that you want, but still nobody is using them. It's too hard. Sometime when you made the transition to keeping secrets encrypted in Git, to moving them to a centralized secret management solution, it became too hard to do the security thing. So devs just didn't. HashiCorp Vault is just too hard to configure. You need to figure out where to store your secrets, how often to rotate them, all that kind of stuff. Adding new users is painful, and it doesn't scale well. If you have large-scale deployments, you need to run in HA mode, or it's hard to tell what to provision. Vault wasn't built for enterprise secret management from the get-go, and it feels like you're adding on the security controls that need to be there. It's time for you to rethink secret management. Let's make secrets developer-centric. Fort Alice is a managed hosted secret store, which offers built-in encryption, secret rotation, access controls, and auditing. We tie into your existing IDP to authenticate users to secrets and allow you to use roles to enable services like your CI/CD pipeline to load secrets. A secret management application is run in memory, either locally or alongside your build pipeline. And the set of secrets loaded changes based on whether you're connecting to prod, test, or dev. But the biggest change is in the user experience. Command line for secret access and adding a secret, and a configuration file for managing access. Fort Alice, it's built for developers. So we're competing head-to-head with HashiCorp Vault, or rather HCP Vault. And if you've seen the pricing for that, there's definitely money to be made there. Your buyer is a CTO because for better or for worse, secret management has moved beyond just the security team to being something that the dev team needs to be on board with. The trigger for doing this now is hopefully obvious. Vault is getting further and further away from what devs want to use in terms of pricing, in terms of license changes and forking to OpenBOW, and now the acquisition of HashiCorp by IBM. I suspect a lot of folks are looking around for reasonable alternatives. So you can provide a more attractive dev experience in something like Doppler, you're in a pretty good spot. So the main differentiators that we're saying that we have here are dev experience and pricing. It's unclear if these are enough. What's unfortunate is this isn't actually necessarily delivering better security. It doesn't protect you from what's become an increasing problem of secrets being stolen from build pipelines. I'm asking you to trust a random startup with potentially the most critical or valuable data in your organization. And it leads to an interesting point, which maybe the problem to solve here is workload identity and not necessarily secret management. Okay, VCs.
I like you're susceptible to Vault getting better.
Just saying you're going to be a little bit better at developer experience, that's not enough. You need to have some key compelling differentiation that is hard for competitors to go after.
I like this one. There's a clear market. It's believable that this company exists a few years from now. The DevX of Vault isn't good. It's not a secret that this is a problem, especially now that IBM has Vault. It feels tech heavy, so good margins, and bottom up go-to-market is plausible.
Enterprises sophisticated enough to use a secret manager don't want to use a hosted solution. It's putting all of their eggs in one basket.
So VCs agree that Vault is a problem. It needs a better DevX. But there's some reticence as to whether this is a sufficient differentiator, like I pointed out. And a hosted solution is scary, again, like I pointed out. All right, incident insight. If you've ever responded to a security incident, you know how hard it is to coordinate across teams, understand the current state of what's going on, track needed remediations, and everything else. That's where incident insight comes in. There are too many things to keep track of. It's a highly manual job, keeping communications going in Slack, ensuring all routes are being investigated, understanding what needs to be done. And this is a time-consuming and tiresome role, especially for longer-lived incidents that we're having more of, things like Log4j. So with Incident Insight, you can take the work of updating and summarizing off of the incident commander so that they can instead focus on making critical decisions. Incident Insight is an incident response Slack bot that summarizes what an issue is using publicly available sources and RAG, gives status updates and summaries on how you're progressing on the incident, and provides critical handover summaries when coverage is moving from one team to another, and prompts you for next steps, as well as auto-generating postmortems for an incident, including logs, summary of the incident, remediation steps to make it easier to get back to protecting your business. Incident Insight is based off of processes already established at large tech companies. So now it's possible for your organization to do the same thing. So Incident Insight is a glorified Slack bot with some LLM for writing and summarizing, and maybe some small memory for incident response efforts. Today, this would mostly be competing against homegrown solutions. Most companies will have in place some manual processes, although these are probably more like forms or templates and not like an interactive experience. And we're starting to see folks apply ML models for exactly this scenario. So Google published a blog post on accelerating incident response using generative AI, and they found that Gen AI could write summaries 51% faster while also improving quality over time. And OpenAI open sourced some of their bots for streamlining some of this work as well. So this is like, the only concern I have here really is it's in a bit of a weird middle ground. That's the main downside I see. The most sophisticated organizations are going to build something homegrown, and the smallest organizations don't need this. So like, is what's left over enough of a market? It might make sense as part of like a PagerDuty or a broader SecOps suite of tools.
Just because big tech companies are buying this in-house doesn't mean other big companies are. Are banks doing this right now too? Do they need it too? Ask people from non-big tech companies to engage and see what they think. Also, if there's deeper stuff that big tech companies are building,
This is the thing, a hard sell outside of a very forward-thinking organizations. Most people just want to check a box. I would expect someone like Blameless, Fire Hydrant, or Incident.io to build this. Some of these companies were already building workflows. How much more is possible with LLMs?
It's not crazy. This is kind of like an incident copilot. You could even generate a runbook from past incidents. This sits right next to SOAR. Big teams will have their own bespoke solutions they want to hold on to.
We already invested in 2 companies doing this. There's much more interest in this space given the SEC guidelines on reporting incidents.
Okay, I'm going very fast. Build stack, last one, gives you reproducible packages. No one likes their build system today, that's not news, least of all security. Your builds aren't reproducible, even across different people, across different environments, across different teams. Security is added on to the build process, like spitting out an SBOM. That's not something that your build process is meant to do from the get-go. Single language systems are pretty good, but multiple language or multiple environment system support isn't great. And build systems are hard to maintain. You need a team to keep yours in check. So that's where Build Stack comes in. It's a Nix-based package builder, bringing reproducibility to your packages, not just your OS. It's really powerful when you need to make a point patch during an incident, so you can upgrade just the affected component without needing to test and upgrade everything. And Nix means it works for all environments, so you can run your CI/CD everywhere. You can finally configure your CI/CD as code, like DevOps teams want to and expect to, and bring your CI/CD into the 21st century. It's true that current build systems kind of suck, so this is a DevOps play. You'd have to convince the DevOps team to buy this, not the security team. And that's kind of part of my concerns. It's hard enough to get folks to think about moving off their current build system. I'm not sure that security is going to be the driver. It's really hard to sell security to DevOps. I'm also not sure this provides any real benefit other than just like run all your servers on Nix, which you should do. But like the gap there is the difficulty of learning Nix, not anything else. And for this to work, you'd have to get the Nix community and ecosystem on board. And the recent drama with Determinate suggests that might be hard. Okay, I'm gonna speed run these, sorry VCs. So what the VCs thought? So honestly, the main barrier here is that not all VCs know about Nix. And for those who do, they're worried of the recent, spiciness. VCs also think it'd be hard to make money here. All right, so that's it. So if I have one last thing for you to do, if you want to pull out your phone, we had 5 pitches. You're a pre-seed investor, and you're looking to write a check for $1.5 million. Where do you put your money? Vote. All right, and we're starting to see some responses maybe come in. Or not. All right, so I think you guys seem to like Fort Alice. Maybe there's a bias here. It'll keep going. Here's what the VC said. And don't worry, I didn't get any term sheets. Alice liked incident response. Bob liked build stack. Charlie liked Fort Alice. And David liked incident insight. So not necessarily the same answer from everyone, not necessarily what you expect. And that's it. I learned, from doing this, I learned about what VCs are looking for, how to position various ideas. With that said, I guess please start some of these companies. Like, I'd be excited to see them. You can steal my slides from the link there. Thanks.